Welcome to the Com Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is September 30th and we have a lot of interesting news. In this episode, Russian and Belarusian sabotage and reconnaissance groups in Poland. Apparently, the Kremlin does not plan to stop. The US has presented a peace plan for Gaza, which could change everything there. And a strange Kadyrov appears on video, while Ukraine turns out to be a non-sovereign state. Orban has hit a new low, and the GUR is handing out black marks to Russian generals. And attempts to destabilize Moldova continue. All this and more in today's episode. There will be a lot of interesting things, so if you're new to this channel, subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. So Russia claims that Ukraine is preparing a provocation in Poland, an infiltration of a Russian Belarusian sabotage and reconnaissance group into the territory of a NATO country. We've really hit rock bottom. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service says that the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Belarusian Kalinovsky Regiment will be involved in this. Plus, at the same time, there may be simulated attacks on critical infrastructure sites in Poland. In general, this Russian Foreign Intelligence Service also claims that Warsaw is aware of these provocations and that the plan was developed by the main intelligence directorate and Polish special services. And in this SVR statement, it is also said that the drone incursions into Poland and Romania were organized by Kyiv as well. Wow. Apparently, the head of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, Naryshkin, ate the wrong kind of mushrooms the day before. I actually have a question. Why would there be a joint Russian-Belarusian sabotage and reconnaissance group? Maybe they'll even be wearing some kind of national costumes. So according to them, Ukraine is supposedly taking some Belarusians and some Russians. So are they going to speak both Belarusian and Russian, and then they're supposed to get caught and confess to something, or maybe not get caught? I don't know. By the way, those drones that flew from Belarus into Poland, how did Ukraine supposedly reprogram them mid-flight over Belarus? Can someone explain that to me? Those Russian Garand drones that flew into Poland, the fighter jets that regularly violate NATO airspace, the Russian landing ship that was off the coast of Denmark when drones were circling over Danish airports, all of that is of course supposedly Ukraine's doing. Am I understanding Russia's logic correctly? Basically, they're just lying all the time. Every statement from the Russian Federation about someone planning to harm Europe should be considered a confession, nothing else, or just an element of intimidation. Why are they putting this out there? Look, there were drones, now sabotage and reconnaissance groups will come in. See, we can do it. Well, of course, they'll say it's all Ukraine, but really it's just intimidation. I wouldn't rule out that the Russians might recruit Russian and Belarusian citizens on behalf of Ukrainian intelligence services remotely, working for the GUR or something like that. Well, they might even ask them to do something nasty, so that later they can testify, saying, Budanov recruited us through Telegram. Or maybe the Polish intelligence services. I'd also like to remind you that there's currently an investigation underway regarding those very postal arson attacks, postal sabotage incidents. Among those involved are citizens of Russia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Ukraine. But according to the investigation, the Lithuanian prosecutor's office directly states that this network is connected to the Russian main intelligence directorate. Channels of coordination have been identified. No one ever doubted it. Digital traces and so on, testimonies. Let me remind you, just to understand how much Naryshkin tends to talk nonsense from time to time, before this he claimed that Britain was preparing an environmental disaster somewhere in the area of Denmark, or maybe somewhere else, but definitely so that a European country would suffer and wants to blame Russia for it. So basically, just imposing sanctions for no reason seems kind of ridiculous. Britain has to blow up a tanker, some old Russian oil tanker, cause an environmental disaster, ruin the entire coastline there. And that's what Britain is supposed to do. In my opinion, it's actually Russia doing that. They've polluted their own Black Sea coast, and Crimea, the occupied Crimea, my homeland by the way, has been polluted too. Now that's who really knows how to make a mess. Russia has advanced further than anyone else in this. Honestly, I have no idea what Naryshkin and Medvedchuk are on. Maybe they're just how they get high and come up with these fantastic stories. It's actually strange they haven't yet claimed that Zelensky is in fact not Putin at all. The so-called special military operation wasn't announced, and actually it's all Zelensky. He's an actor, they put makeup on him, and he made the announcement, attacked himself, and we have nothing to do with it. So the real Putin is supposedly languishing somewhere in the underground labyrinths of the Kremlin. In short, it's another completely insane theory, but it's proof that they never stop, so they'll only stop where they're forced to. The US has presented a plan to end the war in Gaza, an interesting one, by the way, consisting of 20 points. The White House published it, and in my opinion, it's absolutely logical. So the main points, just to sum up the most important ones, are that Israel will not occupy or annex the enclave, there will be an immediate ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli troops, and a freeze on hostilities in exchange for the release of hostages. And Gaza will be freed from terrorism and rebuilt. How exactly? Hamas and other groups must agree not to participate. They must not participate in the governance of Gaza, neither directly nor indirectly. Those Hamas members who voluntarily disarm will be granted amnesty. Gaza will be governed by a temporary administration under the supervision of an international body headed by Donald Trump. The plan also envisions the creation of a special economic zone there with preferential conditions in place. Overall, it's a good plan. As they say, we should go for it. International humanitarian aid will be delivered there immediately. The United States will cooperate with Arab countries and so on. Residents will not be forced to leave the Gaza Strip, although Trump wanted to relocate everyone and build a resort there. In general, they will be able to stay in the territory or leave if they wish. Well, I don't know who would be willing to take them in. By the way, Arab countries aren't exactly eager to take in residents from there. Look, for the people of Gaza, this is a chance to finally start a normal life. They could get jobs, there would be an influx of money and infrastructure. Trump would build some Trump Tower there, maybe a resort. But that's only if the terrorists actually wanted the population to live normal lives, simply put. If they needed to, if they wanted this, they would have directed their energy and money into a completely different direction long ago. And not to the destruction of the State of Israel, because the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies live in luxury and don't give a damn how ordinary people live. On the contrary, lack of education, religious indoctrination, poverty, and the creation of an external enemy, these are the key factors in forming new generations of militants. That's why terrorists don't want Gaza to become a prosperous region. So first destroy the terrorists, and then of course that's the logic. This should have been the first point. Although, by the way, I don't think Hamas has responded yet. How so? Look, it was presented publicly. What's the problem? And here is yet another proof that lack of education, religious indoctrination, and poverty are exactly what global terrorist organizations need. The Taliban. In Afghanistan, they are completely shutting down the internet and have stated that this is a measure to uphold moral standards. Let me remind you, before this, Iran banned Starlink. Their police are out there tracking and triangulating these Starlinks, and you can get into serious trouble for it. In other words, absolutely do not listen to the internet, do not read anything. Everything will be told to you. The mullahs will explain everything to you as it should be. So, in Afghanistan, the country, women are practically completely deprived of their rights. They are forbidden from getting an education, even from speaking publicly, not to mention showing their faces in public. Their movement is restricted, as is their ability to work or visit public places. Basically, music is banned, photographs are banned, images of people are banned. Not just people, but living beings in general. Images, sculptures, artists are not allowed to depict living beings. Now, the internet is being completely shut off. It's hard to imagine such utter medieval darkness could exist today. And do you know what the logic is behind banning everything for women? They see women as the bearers of the family's honor, and a woman must be completely dependent on her husband or guardian, who is called a mahram. In other words, she shouldn't do anything herself, and someone from her relatives must be her guardian, making it so that if she does something wrong, it's on you. You're responsible. Education is forbidden for them because it's seen as a danger of Western influence. No, there's no need to study. In general, control over women is also a way to control men over their relatives. This is how the Taliban authorities have instilled fear into every family. And the depiction of living beings is a whole separate story. So, why do they ban photographs of animals, people, sculptures? Because only God can create a living being? And so, when you create a photograph or some kind of sculpture, you are imitating God, who alone can give life. The fact that it's not alive, well, that's supposedly... Most Muslim countries interpret these texts differently. And they also say that if you depict something in the form of an idol, people might start worshipping it. That's actually why they... By the way, they use phones themselves, and their commanders use them too, and phones have camera and photo functions, and I think they have photos on them as well. So we use Western, foreign technologies. There's no way around it. And in the 2000s, just so you understand how absurd it all became, in 2001, the Taliban blew up the Buddha statues in the Bamiyan Valley. The statues, carved into the rock, dated back to the 6th century AD. One statue was 55 meters tall, the other 37. They said, "These are idols, we must destroy these stone idols." And they fired at these statues with anti-aircraft guns, damaging them, but this is historical heritage. Then they used anti-tank mines. And well, yes. I'm not even mentioning the looted Kabul Museum and a whole bunch of other destroyed historical monuments. So, for example, for a woman to show her face is considered immoral, but child marriages are considered normal. And bachabazi, these dancing boys who are essentially slaves. What is that? Well, that's also some kind of barbarism. Yes, the Taliban, they came in and said we will abolish this. But now I specifically looked into it. There are plenty of investigations showing that they simply turn a blind eye to it. All of this is still happening. But God forbid you post a photo of a kitten or something like that. Barbaric, absolutely barbaric. I was reading about the Taliban, by the way, and I remembered that there haven't been any news updates from Kadyrov in a while. His son hasn't received any medals or orders for a long time. I probably shouldn't have remembered that, because now I'm going to show you a video, but let me warn you first. If you're faint of heart, don't watch.
Как считаете, сколько этим шайтанам в Киеве осталось времени? Месяц-два?
Недолго, да. Это Всевышний знает сколько. Ну, недолго там. Вы видите, да, чем мы занимаемся. Они преступники, террористы, да. Террористам надо закончить. Как мы закончили в свое время в Чеченской Республике.
Но Зеленский останется жить или не совсем жить?
Если меня спросить, то его лучше не быть.
Are there any Klingon translators in my comments? Or maybe it's the language of beast that he's speaking. Now on YouTube you can do automatic dubbing, but there's no option to choose B language to understand what Kadyrov is saying. And to put it mildly, he doesn't look so great. It seems like Putin's cronies are starting to wither away one by one. He can barely drag his own feet, yet he's deciding how long Zelensky has left to live. By the way, even the Kadyrovites themselves haven't been seen for a while. Did they ban Alaudinov from appearing on TikTok or something? And let me remind you, friends, since you're here, that we're currently raising funds for the legendary 3rd Assault Brigade. There's just a little bit left to go, so let's push a bit more. It's actually because of these very people that you don't hear or see the Kadyrovites anymore, and many of them will never see the sunlight again.
Greetings, friends. My call sign is Talbot. I am the commander of the Povsta crew of the 3rd KMSH Brigade Strike UAV Company. I'm addressing the viewers of Boris Tizengauzen's channel with a request to help raise funds for Matrice 30 drones.
These are large copters, we need them for reconnaissance, and they also perform some other very interesting functions. The fundraising goal is large, 1,100,000 hryvnias. We are counting on your support, on your help. Thanks to them, we will be able to destroy the enemy even more effectively and bring Ukraine's victory closer.
Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.
Let's help our defenders. The payment details are in the description. There's Privat, there's Mono, and there's PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. If you don't see the payment details, maybe you're watching on another channel somewhere. Here's a QR code. It takes you straight to the fundraiser. The drones we'll help purchase for the 3rd Assault Brigade in the hands of aces are a truly formidable force. They are defending Ukraine, and let's help them. And I always want to say a huge thank you for that. After the resounding defeat of pro-Russian forces in Moldova, all sorts of riffraff rushed with renewed vigor to help poor Russia. So, for example, Orban popped up like a devil out of a snuff box and started saying, Russia has already won, Russia has won. Why are you croaking? Why say it? If Russia were actually winning, everyone would see it anyway. Let's be honest. But convincing everyone that Russia has already won, first and foremost, the Russians themselves, and that somehow 1 million Russians are dead and crippled, doesn't really smack of victory. And do you know what else he said, Orban? I thought it would hit the bottom every time, but somewhere there, it should reach the core of the earth and that's it, and stop. No, he went right through the core and started digging from the other side. He stated that Ukraine is not a sovereign country and will disappear if the West stops supporting it. Quoting, Ukraine is not a sovereign state. It is supported by the West. We give it weapons. Ukraine should not behave as if it is sovereign. Ukraine has lost 1/5 of its territory in the war with the Russians. That's where its sovereignty ended. If the West decides not to give a single penny, Ukraine will shut down and disappear. And why do you call yourself the West so directly? And he also said that 2 or 3 Hungarian drones are not something Ukraine should be worried about. They're not their enemies here. So he indirectly admitted that the drones were flying. And you see that this isn't the case? Ukraine is not sovereign. On the contrary, Ukraine has shown just how sovereign it is. The fact that part of the territory is temporarily occupied. When the time comes, we will take back what is ours. But there are some people who, after making such statements, don't want to return to their historical homeland somewhere out there in Western Siberia. And I'm not talking to the Hungarians right now, but specifically to those who claim that Ukraine is not sovereign. That's where the Khanty and Mansi are. That's the real historical homeland. And regarding the claim that losing part of the territory means sovereignty is lost there as well. Finland, during the Winter War with the Soviet Union, also lost part of its territory. So why doesn't he call Finland non-sovereign? And as for dependence, he absolutely got it right. It's dependence on Russian oil that's a sign of lacking sovereignty. As soon as they tightened the valve on the oil pipeline a little, look at the withdrawal symptoms that started. All the demons, foreign ones, just started coming out of him, out of this Orban. And by the way, Hungary blocked 12 Ukrainian news outlets in its country because Ukraine had previously blocked 2 Hungarian ones that were close to Orban. And do you know what was covered in those outlets? Obviously, criticism of support for Ukraine, as well as portraying the European Union and NATO as fragmented and not particularly effective organizations. Listen, if the European Union and NATO are not particularly effective organizations, then go join the Customs Union and the CSTO with Putin. What's the problem? By the way, do your hands not burn when you take money from the EU fund? Maybe that money isn't very effective either. Honestly, what a disgusting character. By the way, here's another statement. Hungary, he decided, so to speak, to cash in on some currency. Hungary will not give up Russian oil. Turns out there are 2 reasons for this. Any other supply source is less reliable than the Russian one secured by long-term contracts. Thus, Russia guarantees Hungary's security. That's what I'm saying. Hide in the corn, pterodactyl. Now, here's another Hungarian with the call sign Magyar, who commands unmanned systems forces in Ukraine. He'll clearly explain, using the example of the Druzhba oil pipeline, that oil doesn't flow through a burned-out pipeline. In fact, he's already doing this right now. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Calm analysis is better than any sedative. There you go, I can already see the headlines. And Tizengauzen is taking the bread out of the hands of pharmaceutical giants. So make sure to subscribe, friends. The GUR, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, is publishing the names of Russian war criminals involved in the missile terror against Ukraine. Why is this important? They published the data of 13 people from the command staff of the Russian Aerospace Forces long-range aviation who are involved in planning and organizing missile strikes on Ukraine's civilian infrastructure. Why is this important? Because this publication with photos, passports, all the details, addresses, it's a black mark. I think everyone remembers the wonderful story about the general and the scooter when the head of the Radiation, Chemical and Biological Defense Forces, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, passed away. It feels like these 13 people from the command staff will suddenly start becoming a little less alive. Just like that old rhyme about 10 little African Americans. 13 generals decided to go for a swim, one drowned, and now there are 12. Or remember how in Balashika, near Moscow, Lieutenant General Moskalik also died in a car explosion. So these 13 high-ranking officials responsible for launching missiles at Ukraine will get what they deserve. Let me remind you, the missiles are falling directly onto residential buildings, destroying entire apartment entrances. Not long ago, after one of these missiles hit the Darnitsky district of Kyiv, 25 people were killed, including 4 children. So there will be no pity for these monsters. And once again, I want to congratulate the people of Moldova on making a progressive, civilized choice that this gold-toothed Soviet riffraff couldn't ruin the future, even with money, including the youth too. The Moldovan opposition's rally against the election results lasted a whole 15 minutes and gathered only a few hundred people. That's just how it is. No one wants to go without getting paid. So Dodon came out and said that, basically, it was foreign countries that ensured the victory of Maya Sandu's party. They tricked us, everyone, to the barricades, and then some old ladies shouted a bit, and that was it. In short, Dodon warned, you're celebrating too soon, you don't understand what you're getting yourselves into. He's already appealing to the legitimate authorities of Moldova. Just so you understand, an enormous amount of money was poured into these elections from Russia. An unprecedented amount of resources was used, and it didn't help at all. That sweet duo, Shor and Dodon, are out of the picture. They're headed straight to extinction, right alongside the pterodactyl. Just so you understand, Shor is like the Moldovan Medvedchuk, and Dodon is like the Moldovan Yanukovych. Well, that's a bit of a stretch, but that's what I call them at least. And I'd love to see the looks on their faces together with Kirienko, who was responsible for this area, when they have to answer for this failure. I think that because of this, someone in Russia is definitely going to go out the window in the near future. And just to understand this Savkov mentality, never lived well themselves and won't let you either. Putin, Stalin in the form of the military and so on. Today I came across a remarkable video from Russia. I want to show it to you to help you better understand just how much confusion there is in the minds of Putin's electorate, crossing themselves to Lenin. Well, take a look.
Сегодня же праздник Воздвижения Креста Господня.
Слава тебе, Господи, хоть поставили. Мы думали, еще будет до конца зимы.
А почему слава? Он, наоборот же, церковь всю уничтожил.
Ну, ничего страшного.
Yeah, they're crossing themselves to Lenin, who demolished these churches by the thousands, executed clergy, the intelligentsia, and so on. By the way, what happened to the Putin squads? I used to run into them sometimes, those militant old ladies calling out, Biden, think carefully. Your dollar will die soon. I remember all of that. When I first heard it, I wondered, how does that even go together? Church, war. Lenin, Stalin. When I first heard about Russia's main military church, I couldn't believe they came up with something like that. I've talked about it many times. Let me remind you, this is a church painted in khaki, the main icon is painted on boards from cannon carriages, and the tracks from German tanks from World War II are melted into the steps. Basically, the whole place is full of all kinds of symbolism. Even the distances are tied to the dates of the beginning and end of the war. And then, the cherry on top. They planned a mosaic in the church, where Putin, a Russian official, Matvienko, and even the ghoul, Aksionov, were supposed to be depicted. And somewhere in the portraits, Stalin was supposed to be depicted as well. So this is a pure pagan shrine, not a church. All that's missing is an altar for sacrifices. So yeah. Well, yes, this is exactly that kind of phenomenon. to put Stalin in a church, the very man who destroyed thousands of churches. By the way, it was on Stalin's orders that the Cathedral of Christ the Savior was blown up. In its place, they built the open-air Moscow swimming pool. And now that's it, they're paving over the pools and building churches again. And this news is just amazing. I just couldn't pass this one by. Russians have been promised flying taxis by the end of Putin's 6th term. In Russia, by 2036, when Putin's 6th presidential term comes to an end, flying taxis might appear. In certain cities, if the infrastructure develops successfully, and by the 26th term, every Russian will be given their own airplane. It's noteworthy that the Russian auto industry has just been completely destroyed. It doesn't exist, it's gone. Chinese cars with swapped badges, Moskvich cars assembled on Chinese equipment from Chinese parts. That's what there is. So Russian cars, they could already be considered flying taxis right now. That's what I think. Any Russian car is already a flying taxi. The only question is, what's flying? It's unexpected for the passenger. Because these Moskvich cars they're making now, they don't even have airbags. Modern Russian cars. Fantastic. Well, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and subscribe to this channel. And let's support our defenders from the legendary 3rd Assault Brigade. Let's help them with their fundraising. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and glory to Ukraine.